Hey guys,
Stan?
remember me?
No.
Barely.
Who's this guy?
I have something important to tell you.
What is it?
I'm in Chicago.
Okay. You didn't tell me. That's kind of rude, but okay.
Yeah, I'm in Chicago, and I'm not going back to England this time.
What?
Is that good? Is that good, right? That's good.
Well, the whole family came here, so it's not
good.
one of those.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay.
No, we moved back.
Oh, yes. I knew this, but I'm pretending I didn't.
Yeah, it's good. It's good energy for the show.
Our year in Europe has come to a close, and I'm here. It was a wild month. Moving across continents, it takes a lot out of a person. It was hard to record the show during that time.
Yeah.
It was hard to come on the show and tell you about all the pre-releases I won.
Those free packs.
Stanislav, this is like the best news ever. We don't have to worry about weird scheduling coordination. I get to see you.
Yeah. Now we have to figure out a way to tell Doom his services are no longer needed.
Oh, wait. No. I'm not doing that.
Last show? Mike's last show?
07's in the chat or whatever.
I had a good run. I can't complain.
Just kidding.
It was a good year.
What we realized this year is that we didn't need another Stan, but we needed our first Doom.
That's right.
That's deep.
It's true.
Yeah, you like that? So I'm back on the show. Happy to be here. Good to see you all, especially Shane and Devon, because I don't think I've seen you guys in 2024.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, now we have to start this episode so we can keep talking.
What episode?
Hello and welcome to episode 262 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps. Hi, Shane.
Stanislav, my friend, back in. How does it feel to say in Chicago once again?
Well, I'm lying because I'm in Skokie, but
How's it feel to just be back helming the show? Shane didn't deliver the episode numbers with quite the gusto that you do, I have to say.
Yeah, it's not the same.
The conviction. Yeah.
Well, Shane hasn't done any open mics or any time on the stage. He doesn't know stage left and stage right.
Yes,
Acting like you know me.
he hasn't tread the footboards, as they say.
Shane doesn't know what it's like to bomb at an open mic because you tried to do crowd work with children. He just doesn't know. It was a bad idea.
Crowd work.
I did it. I did it. And you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to introduce the Godfather, Dave Harbarger.
Yep, it's me. We're here. I've also never done an open mic. I don't know if people believe that or not, but the number of open mics I've done in my life is 0.
I feel like this is really good preparation for open mic, though. Like we've done 262 open mics at this point.
If that open mic happens to be just making up stuff about Magic the Gathering, I think I could do okay.
It's kind of like a closed mic, right?
Yes, these are closed mics. We get retakes.
Oh, good point.
You know what I want to know? How many open mics has Devon O'Donnell, aka Doomwake, done?
None. 0.
I feel like you feel like you do well. I mean, you're basically a performer most
Would you
of
call
the
that
day.
an open mic? I guess maybe you would.
You can't do retakes like we get. We can't say Tanner, edit this retake when you're on stream.
Well, I do that all the time. If I'm recording something for YouTube and something messes up, I'll just be like, okay, take 2. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
now
Yeah.
it doesn't translate that to the live feed, but
Yeah.
so it's already clipped
Devon,
and shipped and all that stuff.
Yeah. Devon, did you do like any kind of performance growing up that led you to want to be a streamer, or was this just kind of the love of Magic? Just random question, I guess.
No, mostly just Magic. I mean, I grew up. You probably don't even know this, but I went to culinary school. I may have mentioned it before a couple times, but yeah, no, I was.
Yeah,
I
definitely remember that.
I was in restaurants for like 10 years before I moved to like a bank job, and then that got messed up with COVID, and now we're here. But no, it's mostly just love of Magic.
Mostly. Also the insane income I'm sure that Twitch provides you.
Yeah, while we were grinding our teeth in mise en scène, Doomwake was grinding his knives on mise en place.
Is that a quote from the bear?
Only in my spec script.
Uh-huh. I think they call that fanfic. Stan, I don't think it's a spec script.
You know what? Mise en place, that's a joke for the culinary girlies.
I
Devon
get
gets
it. I know what it is.
Oh, if you don't know what a mise en place is,
Or not to Stan, the most like level 1 culinary phrase. I don't know if everybody here knows what mise en place is. You know who I'm pretty sure who knows what mise en place is? Heavy Play. Because Randy at Heavy Play has developed a new card gaming brand that'll improve your gameplay and your game day. And you know what? I do think of the way that you function when you have all of your things snapping together with Heavy Play. It's very mise en place. Am I right? We call we can call it Heavy Place, right?
Honestly, it really is. Like I'm sure everyone does. I have like very precise places. I want my specific things to go. Speaking of places that specific things can go, Devon has a Heavy Play hat on his head.
I told you the hat was too small.
He's not wearing one. It is on his head.
Well, also I have headphones on, so that'll, we'll leave it there though. It's fine.
Yeah, it's great. It makes you look like you're literally 7 feet tall now in the video.
It's like those 10-gallon hats,
Yep, it's great. So their playmats, deck boxes, and card sleeves feature enhanced ergonomics, mobility, and protection. You know them, you love them. You attach dice, you bundle decks, you carry your playmat. It's all the ABCs in a single hand for your mise en place. Coming soon to your LGS or shop now at heavyplay.com.
I saw the Heavy Play folks. It was two folks in the company, not the El Presidente, Randy, at RC Denver. Sweet booth. They were actually sponsoring a bunch of stuff. They sponsored the stream. They had like post-match interviews like set up, they had this whole like sofa thing set up where like Tan and Grace was talking to folks, and they were super nice. People were really into the product. Like I sent you all a photograph of the garbage can.
It's just filled with boxes.
It was
with Heavy Play cardboard.
That's awesome.
So many packages from like the playmats and stuff. They busted out the purple on site. It arrived like Saturday afternoon, and I saw people like using the purple. The purple stuff is fly. It is so nice. I am ordering the deck box and the dice box for sure to go with my fresh new boring gray mat that I picked up as well. So
perfect. All right. Well, if you want to get in there,
if you want to buy it, Dave, I'm talking.
You're talking now. You're talking.
Heavyplay.com. The code is the Divedown 2024 for 10% off your first order.
We got to start doing some Heavy Play giveaways just because we don't need more than one dice box per person. Like that's the beauty of the Heavy Play technology is that like once you have the one playmat and the one dice box, like it's so modular.
I want to create a Frankenstein's monster, like a caterpillar, a cardboard centipede.
Okay, we went
interesting.
There.
Yeah, from mise en place to human centipedes, Heavy Play's got you covered. Okay, Stan, what do we think this episode is about this week?
It's a jam-packed episode, to be honest.
I think it is.
Shane was on the floor of RC Denver. He's got a lot of data to report on, some experiences, some observations, and a ton of recap on who won, who did well, some emerging decks, and really the stories of the weekend. I think that's going to be the bulk of the episode.
Can I tell you, one of the pieces of data we have to look at that people were nice enough to put together for us has percentages based off of 14,000 decks across 40 events.
It's a lot of decks.
Did you guys see that tweet?
It was nice of them to do that for us.
Yes. For the community, not for us specifically. But anyway.
So we have Shane's recap corner, which is a big corner. It's an obtuse angle. Then Doom, Dave, and Stanislav, we played some decks on the internet. We're going to talk about those.
I mean, I would say Dave did a lot of the work for the recap corner as well. This is going to be a tag team. Yeah. I can't wait.
Just making things up about Magic.
That's what we do. We are a podcast.
Isn't that what we do every week?
Yes.
Kind of. It's time to let people know. I'm entering my truth era.
Your radical truth era?
My radical truth era. God. Radical honesty. Wait till I see you guys in Chicago, because I have some feelings to share with all of you. The bottom line, Magic's in a little bit of a ruckus. Modern had a really wild weekend.
Thank goodness.
We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff. Yeah.
All right, before all that, let's housekeep.
Can I give some housekeeping right off the top? MagicCon Chicago is coming up imminently, and we have been talking for a long time about doing an event on Saturday nights. And I just wanted to mention, I have decided where the event is. I'm telling you all on air now. We're going to be going to a place called District Brew Yards in the lovely West Loop, West Town area.
Ooh.
It is a pay-as-you-go, like self-serve craft beer joint.
Perfect.
Oh, do they give you those like
Little
arcade
cards.
credit cards?
They do give you credit cards. They have board games. They also have a place called Lily's Q inside it, which is a great Chicago barbecue place that you can order counter service from. And all of this means trying to keep things not complicated. It's a beautiful space, though. District Brew Yards. And here's my ask of everybody here. Sometimes we ask people stuff off the top of the show. People who are interested in coming, I want you to anybody who's interested, remember the divedown.com/Chicago. We have a web page up on our site right now. It is not in the navigation because I don't want people to find it randomly, but we have what we in the industry call an event landing page that I would love for you to go have a look at if you're willing. It is, again, the divedown.com/Chicago. If you go there, you can see the times that we're proposing to be there, the location of this place, and also there's a form there that you can fill out to let us know that you are interested in coming, which would be very helpful to us to know how many people are interested in coming. Please don't joke with us on this. I have a CAPTCHA set up, so no spammies, please. But I will need your email and name so that we can try to make sure you're a real person from this. So please, if you can't take a minute, just let us know that you're interested in coming. Again, District Brew Yards, Saturday the 24th. We're thinking 8 to 11 p.m.
Probably goes without saying, 21 and up. This is a bar.
Yeah.
We have some younger listeners. We have some younger patrons. I think all of our patrons are at least age 20, but we've got some college friends. And unfortunately, this event is 21 and up.
Yes.
Yeah, I hung out with a listener who was like 2 months away from drinking legality age after Saturday at RC Denver. I will not out their name, but it was very funny. I was like,
No doxing.
"Oh, you can't drink. What's life like for you?
Yeah.
I know.
Healthier."
So sorry, it is 21 up. Devon?
And if for some reason you can't submit the form, please head over to twitch.tv/aspiring spike and let him know that you'll be there.
Actually, what we do want
Spike
you to
come,
do is,
so.
yeah, we want you to try to get Everett to come.
Yes.
So if you could help apply a little bit of groundswell social media campaign, let's see if we can get him to come.
I'll do my part tomorrow in his chat.
Oh, appreciate it, Devon. Again, thedivedown.com/Chicago. The page is up. Info's up. Go check it out.
Dave, always making sneaky websites when we're not looking. All right, so housekeeping Patreon edition. We actually have no new patrons or increased tiers to mention this week. We do have some new reviews, including one from Direwolf 916, who said that the Dive Down is the best Magic podcast. Not necessarily true of whether that's Magic the Gathering or Magic the Illusions. but-
Prestidigitation. Yeah.
yeah, we'll take it. And then Sam Reich said that we're very nice guys who like popular card games. which is true. I have dabbled in Pokemon. Shane's dabbled in Flesh and Blood.
I play poker.
Doomwake.
I got
Kinda frequently.
Yu-Gi-Oh cards on my desk right now, so
Nice.
I was just going to say, Devon has the heart of the cards. David has an
One
ace
time.
up his sleeve.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also would like to recognize Sam Reich for saying, not annoying enough that I can't fall asleep during it. As someone who listens to podcasts and fall asleep all the time, I know what that means. It's actually a nice thing that Sam is saying there, so thank you for the nice reviews.
If you'd like to join our Patreon, you can do so over at patreon.com/thedivedown. A mere $1 per episode gets you into our Discord, but the more you pay, the more you get. Get some swag, have some fun. We'll love you forever. But maybe you can't support us on a weekly basis and you just want to get some swag one time for yourself. You can do that at thedivedown.com/store. This one is in the navigation. You could just go to thedivedown.com, find the store that way, get some Dive Down branded swag for your head or other parts of your body, most major organs. You can also support us while playing Magic Online with Mana Traders using promo code THEDIVEDOWN_3YO. This one goes live or remains live through the end of February. If you aren't sure about what the current code is, just check the show notes of the most recent episode, and that'll always have the most recent Mana Traders code. But if you're signing up for Mana Traders in February, the promo code is THEDIVEDOWN_3YO. YO. House kept.
It's kept.
Okay, 16 minutes into the episode, we can start talking about Magic.
We had things to cover this time. I have no regrets this time.
No regret, zero.
Yeah.
I never do. I have no regrets for any of the content we make, Dave.
All right.
Own it, love it. But Dave, we have some modern upheaval this week, and I'm not talking about Thing in the Ice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Upheaval is actually legal, so you're talking about that card, right?
I'm not talking about upheaval, legal and modern. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. Like, there was, we have Denver to talk about.
There were so many events this weekend. There were RCs in Denver, Ottawa, Canada, and Yokohama, Japan. Now, we're not going to talk about all of these specifically, but like I mentioned earlier, we do have data that came out today, Monday. Today's Monday, that is inclusive of all of those events. I think I'm not sure if Yokohama was in actually, because it's not listed on the tweet that the data came with, but we have some notes about each one of them. But there is a lot of modern going on this weekend, and it was wild, y'all. It was like, I don't know what happened. I will say, who knew that a 4-mana do-nothing enchantment would cause so much upheaval in so many different formats? I will say, Devon did. By the time we got done with our second spoiler app, Devon was kind of like, I think Leyline might actually be the best card in this set. I don't know if it's going to hold, but we'll see. Certainly, it was the card of the weekend.
Splinter Twin.
Splinter Twin. It is very Splinter Twinny. And also, Shane was there. In Denver, at least. Yeah. How was it, Shane?
It was good. It was good to be able to drive from my home and not have to stay in a hotel. All that good stuff. The event seemed like it was ran well. I mean, I was not playing in anything, but I didn't see anything that looked particularly concerning. But there was, the usual vendors, cosplayers, artists. The prize wall seemed like it was reasonably priced, which I appreciate. I sold some high value cards to vendors for, basically TCG low. I was happy with that. Saw some familiar faces. I missed some people, the people I found out were there after the fact. I'm like, why didn't I see Gabe Maxon? Where was Spider Space? I should have said hi. I didn't see him. But there were 1,331 players in this Denver RC. And Dave, like you were saying, this tournament this tournament was a consequence of things blowing up everywhere, but I feel like this was definitely impacted by the new, fresh face of the format. And tell me about this.
Yeah, it was definitely Violent Outburst's fault. No, I mean, Leyline of the Guild Pack's fault.
New card, Violent Outburst.
Yeah, everyone's favorite new Nephilim. So let's talk about the meta.
Nephilim are what? Are those the multicolored things like that? Is that Nephilim?
Four color cards from Ravnica, yeah.
Okay, I don't remember those.
I'm going to look up the Nephilim, the one that's not green.
Right, exactly. Not green. All right, so here's the metagame share. We got a couple different numbers. Of course, Melee always has things that are not 100% accurate. The numbers we got from DreamHack, we think maybe are not as accurate as numbers we got from another player named I Love Azorius or at AzoriusI on Twitter.
Yeah, they did some work.
Because there were 1,300 decks to go through and fix and tag. And so, Shane, what did the meta actually look like?
Teamer Rhinos, 19.8%.
Oh,
that's a lot.
That's a lot.
And when Azorius I says Teamer Rhinos, they specifically mean Teamer Rhinos. They went in because DreamHack stated it was 21% of the field, but 1.2% of those or so were actually Azorius of the 4-color Leyline Rhinos. There were not actually a ton of Leyline Rhino players in Denver. I think it was something like 23.
23? Okay.
23 was the actual count. Okay, so 23 Leyline Rhinos, because this was popping up around Friday afternoon. So I was on site, and I see a tweet from Jessie Robkin, who was in Denver, and she was like, hey, I'm looking for the following cards. And I was like, I have all of these, except for the Leyline of the guild packs. And so we actually came across each other. I was like, Jessie, what's up? And I was like, I have all those cards looking for. She's like, yeah, people are trying to pivot to this Leyline Rhino 4-color build because it seems like it's busted.
Yeah, and it also came up from some prelims, either on Wednesday or Thursday on Moto, is where there started to be a little bit of conversation in the Discord about that as well, saying, oh, these people are going 4-0 with Leyline in Rhinos, because going into this event, I think a lot of people thought that the deck that was really priced to move was Domain Zoo with Leyline in it. Was getting more popular. It was popping up in prelims and other stuff like that, and there was starting to be a lot more hype around that suddenly. And then all of a sudden, Thursday afternoon, like you said, Friday afternoon, we're talking about it in Rhinos, which
Yeah, I can't remember the exact first person who forwarded with it, but I think there were 2 or 3 different foros on Thursday, and it was somebody who tweeted about it saying this deck is broken, somebody who forwarded with it, and then I think, like you said, it just kind of blew up from there.
So how do we want to talk about this? So I did a little write-up about what's going on in this deck. If you haven't seen it, I think you probably have seen it right now, but what the difference is between, I mean, essentially what we're talking about here is 4-color Rhinos, which is similar in principle in some ways to the 4-color list that was popular, last year or the year before, that was really prompted by Leyline binding essentially becoming an option for a deck like Rhinos to run as removal if you need it. And so people were playing that deck at different points in time. Of course, there was like Yo Rhinos with like the Yorian build that also had white in it at different points in time. But what we're really talking about here is a package that essentially is for Leyline of the Guild Pact, for Leyline binding, and for Scion of Draco, which also figure very prominently into Domain Zoo right now. And what's replaced between the 4-color Rhinos builds and the traditional teamer ones, or the more traditional teamer ones, is main deck Tishana's Tidebinders kind of not there, Murktide Region's kind of not in those lists, and Flame of Menor is not really in those lists anymore either.
There's also a couple other very important cards that are missing, such as Dead Gone and Lorwyn Revealed.
Lorwyn Revealed, I saw you mention this later in the notes, and this is definitely not standard. Like the ones that were in Denver all had Lorwyn Revealed, and then I did see some of the lists that you were looking at where they removed Lorwyn Revealed, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like that seems bonkers to me. But
I didn't notice it in the ones that I was looking at either.
Okay.
Dead Gone, I didn't notice if it was gone or not, but if you say so, I totally believe you.
No, it's dead. It's not
that's
gone.
A bunch of... Yeah, it's dead. Dead, not gone. And of course, those are a lot of the sort of utility cards being removed from the deck. Kind of. It's like extra threats, tempo card into Shauna's Tidebinder, Flame of Menor is your kind of like multi-purpose glue, and then Dead Gone is a piece of cheap interaction. Some of that's being replaced by binding, and then your cheap threat that's replacing it is Scion.
One thing I will say about them cutting Dead Gone is if you have Leyline and you don't really need the Dead Gone as much, because if you open on Leyline, any fetch land, shock land will just let you cast a turn 1 Leyline binding. So you have that 1 mana interaction if you're willing to mulligan to Leyline.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was always true of 4-color Rhinos. They're always cutting Dead Gone, or frequently cutting Dead Gone for binding.
Yeah.
Because it's just a better removal spell. And
so I spent some time playing Zoo. We can talk about that later. But that's the story of what this deck is right now. It was certainly a big news story. I don't know where we want to go from here in the overall story of the tournament, Shane, but what do you think?
Well, we have the rest of the metagame to talk about. We just diverged immediately into Rhino talk, which I'm fine with, by the way.
Stance back, baby.
Yeah.
So that's the hype deck. It was only 1.2% of the room. So 24 people, not blowing the doors off in terms of percentage being there. We will talk about win percentage of the deck overall later on. Be prepared. It's good. The rest of the tournament, Golgari Yawgmoth, 12.2%. Amulet Titan 9, Rakdos Scam 6.9, nice. Living End 5.6, Is It Murktide 5.2, Domain Zoo 4.3, 5-color Creativity continuing to creep up back at 3.2, Green Tron 3.1, Scales 3, 4-color Omnith 2.9, Hammer 2.4, Azorius Control 2.3. We'll have a little bit to talk about with that later. Burn at 2.2, and then Other at 13.4, so everything below 2%. So even if my usual cutoff for Other, when I do these to save myself some time, is 3. So let's go and so Other is about 25%, and then 75%, let's say 3% and above. So yeah, I think that's pretty standard for a tournament. It's a little bit top heavy with about 19.8% Teamer Rhinos, 21 or so if you add in the 4-color Rhinos. So there was a lot of cascade going on. If you add in Living End, that puts it up to about 27% of the top of the meta running cascade spells. So yikes. Anecdotally, and I was doing a little bit of Twitter reporting, when I was walking around the top row, the rows of tables, it was a lot of what I just said, which is perhaps unsurprising. I didn't see a lot of grief up there. But I was seeing a lot of Living End. I was seeing a lot of Rhinos. I was seeing a ton of Yawgmoth, Titan. It's kind of just the same stuff over and over and over again. It felt like modern until we got deeper in the tournament. I think we saw a few things float to the top. We'll talk about that in a second. And of course, the presence of the 4-color Rhino decks and the Domain Zoo being a little bit more interesting this tournament, I think were kind of the biggest stories for sure. So thankfully, again, to Azorius Eye, we have some win rates. We have some conversion rates, both of which I think are really interesting. And I think perhaps let's start. I mean, it's so boring to read through the win rates, but I love doing it, especially because we're going to talk about collected win rates at the end of the multiple tournaments. So let's just get some highlights here.
Yeah, can we talk about plus 50% decks and sub 50% decks?
Yeah,
I have them grouped below into those things. They're not in order, but here's the decks that were 50% or above. We have Yawgmoth at essentially 51%, Living End at 54.5%, Murktide, I wrote in all caps, at 51.7%.
Oh man, it's like it won the RC.
First time I saw Murktide. Domain Zoo, 52.8%. Creativity, 54.5%. Omnath, 50.3%. Titan, 50.1%. And then, of course, smaller samples. We need to talk about two decks that stand out on the lower end, and that's Azorius Control at 53% and 4-color Rhinos at 56.65% win rate, the highest win rates of any of the decks listed on Azorius Eye's table. Thoughts?
It's not bad.
56.65 seems good.
Yeah, I would assume that a lot of those 4-color Rhinos players probably opened on Leyline plus Scion a lot.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I mean, I think the things that are interesting about Denver particularly, like I said, I think we have like a 40-odd multi-event matrix to go over later. I think the story of Denver, I think, is, hey, creativity is pretty good in the meta right now, and people who play creativity likely know what they're doing. Domain Zoo is definitely no slouch. I think being like nearly 53% for what is essentially like a creature just zoo, like a swing in and attack and have stubborn denial is like your counter spell is surprisingly good. Living End, strong weekend. It was a good weekend to be a Living End gamer, not only because of the Rhino meta, but we'll talk about sort of the things that it did strongly against the whole weekend, and it was just overall a very solid choice for people. So, I mean, between Rhinos at 50, essentially, Living End at 54.5, and then 4-color Rhinos at like 56+%, I think we can say that the people need to be running maybe a few more Chalice of the Voids out there.
Maybe 2 Treat to Fairies.
One thing that stands out to me, just mentioning this about the Murktide win rate, is the only thing we needed to go from 49% to 51% was that one Scryland. It's the big difference.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Hey, I saw these samples that were like breaking the Rhinos decks along like the axis of how many Surveil lands they ran.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
I feel very weird about it. Basically, it showed that people with 0 or 1 Scryland had like a 5% lower win rate than people with 2 or 3 Scrylands.
That just shows their level of dedication to Magic. They picked up the Surveil lands.
I feel like it's probably closer to that than it is these things making that big of a difference. I can't imagine they make a 5% difference in win rate for a deck. That would be shocking, to be honest.
No, they Surveil. They don't shock you.
Yeah, nailed it.
So I played one league with a Rhino deck in preparation for this episode, and it was my first time playing with Surveil lands in Modern. And Devon, you had made a comment either on the last episode or the one before that, where even just having that one Surveil land almost feels like having an extra draw, just because of the card filtering it provides. And I think that feels so true, and it almost makes that 5% jump make sense, because Rhinos being this deck that just lives off the top of the library so often, being able to like even get one bad card out of the way just like gets you closer to that Violent Outburst or Chartless Agent, or gets you closer to like whatever the one piece of interaction you need to get out of a sticky situation. So maybe in a format that says Razor's Edge is Modern, where like every card matters so much, getting a bad card out of the way to draw a good card a turn sooner actually is the difference maker, and that big of a jump in win percentage.
Yeah, I grabbed two off of Spencer, who we talk a lot about on this one of the Citizens of the Dive Down Nation. He was at RC Denver as well, and thankfully he was so nice to sell me the Thundering Falls and the other one to
Hedge Maze.
Thank you, Hedge Maze, to slot into my deck, and I felt like they were definitely good. But I was telling you this, Stan, and Dave, I think too, is that it's one more thing that made Rhinos feel even slightly more challenging to play, because it adds yet another small decision. Like, I feel like Rhinos has actually gotten a little bit more challenging to play with the addition of things that make it better, like Lorien Revealed, like Tidebinder, like the Surveil lands and things like that, where you have to make more decisions about when you play things and how you sequence your lands, and if you're going to get a tap land, and do you want to stay open for interaction and things like that. And that really it just added a little bit to the complexity for me, where it's like, do I surveil now? Do I need to save it for like a later surveil? And I think it's one of those things you have to learn how to play with again a little bit.
Yeah, one thing for me, like when I noticed playing them, the most important thing they did for me was it almost feels like they increased the range of keepable hands. And, as Rhinos players, I'm sure you've all been there, where you see the two-lander with, a two-lander in the nuts, right? You have the Cascade spell, the Force, whatever. And now with those Surveil lands, you're so much more likely to hit that third land, which means, if I see a hand with two fetches, I'm 100% keeping. I don't care what the rest of the cards are. So, yeah, it feels like it increases the range of hands that you're keeping, which in turn makes the pitch spells better, because every mulligan the pitch spells get worse.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Do we want to talk about gameplay of these decks right now, or do you want to save it for after the meta breakdown?
Let's save a little bit. Let's just save it.
All right, so let's talk sub 50% decks then real quick. This is a list of decks that is starting to become more familiar, I think, unfortunately, in some ways. So Team of Rhinos was just below 50%. However, when you're 19.8, 20% of the field, you're going to start to get mirror matches. This is not controlled for mirror, so you're going to start to have regress towards 50%, kind of regardless of how good the deck does sometimes when it gets that big. So there's probably a little bit of artificial weight on that number, downward pressure on that number. And then Scam, Scales, Tron, Burn, Hammer. That's your decks that did worse than 50%. They were all between 50 or 45 and 49% win rates. And that's quickly becoming tier 2 of Modern, I guess, or maybe even tier 3.
Look at that,
honestly,
Merfolk
at this point.
Rate. Whew. That's
yeah,
tough.
the Merfolk is on the list as 37%. 13 players brought it. That is tough.
How does that doesn't make sense to me, because the conversion rate of Merfolk was actually like 25% of the pilots, nearly 30% of the pilots. So maybe it was just top heavy and everyone else just did terribly with it.
Yeah, maybe there was like one or two people that did well, and then, the other 6 people just 0-2 dropped or something. Or 0-4
exactly.
dropped, I guess.
So, all right. So that's the overall win rates, and then conversion rates. Shane, since you were talking about it,
sure.
What do you think about the difference between conversion rate and win rate? Like, what do you think that this teaches us that win rate doesn't?
I mean, I'm quickly comparing, and it's not a direct relationship, but I think like when you have smaller sample size, you have more noise, right? Or you can have bigger deltas between overall win rates and conversion rates. So like when you say something like, hey, 28% of Merfolk pilots converted, but it also had a 38% win rate, then you're like, okay, some people did quite well and other people did not. So I think when you look at larger sample sizes, then you can get closer to the truth, as always, when it comes to data, right? But I think some of the more interesting things that we can see is that Rhinos had a team of Rhinos had a subpar conversion rate in the low 20s, but then right on its heels, even though the win rate was not a huge delta, the conversion rate for our Yawgmoth pilots we're about 28% of Yawgmoth. Let's say the average here looks like it's about 23. So Yawgmoth was significantly over average in terms of a conversion, as were Living End, where 35% of the pilots converted. That's the most of any deck by about 3 to 4%, because the next one below it is Azorius Control. Again, that's a much smaller sample size. So Living End had a lot of pilots and did quite well making it to day 2. Following that, we had good performances out of decks like Is It Murktide, Domain Zoo, 5-color Creativity, even Mono Green Tron. even though Mono Green Tron had like a 43% win rate, some of its top pilots, I did see people on the top tables playing Tron. So people who knew what they were doing or ran hot made it to day 2. And then some of decks like Hardened Scales, 4-color Omnath, Mono White Hammer, Burn, Azorius Hammer, just didn't convert as well as a lot of the other decks we just talked about. So, I mean, I think that it's hard you can't make any definitive statement based on either win rate or conversion rate, but I think you can combine the two things to try to form a picture of like, hey, what was really doing well this weekend? What made sense to bring? And I think those are things like Azorius Control, things like Living End, things like Domain Zoo, things like 5-color Creativity, things like Yawgmoth. You had a better chance of spiking the tournament, it seems like.
One quick thing, I'm going to go on, maybe this is a bit of a hot take, and maybe I'm going on a soapbox here, but I wonder if Rhinos and Yawgmoth are the number 1 and number 2 played decks, and you have Rhinos below average on conversion rate and Yawgmoth above average, do you think that the Yawgmoth pilots figured out the Rhinos matchup? Because typically speaking, at least, from our experience, I would have to imagine that Rhino, like we've always assumed that Rhinos is good against Yawg, so I wonder if maybe they cracked the code.
That is an interesting thing because it did not crack the code, but I will give you a bit of a spoiler. And across 444 matches tracked by MTG decks this past weekend alone, it was 44% against Rhinos. So that is not as bad as I think it has been previously, right? Where I think a lot of Yawg pilots are kind of like, yeah, it's just a really tough matchup. I don't really want to face it down. And 44%, I think, is still within like okay, if I know what I'm doing, I probably am about 50%.
Do you think it's Yawg cracking the code or Yawg benefiting from the lack of Fury?
Yeah,
I think we would have seen that previous weeks too, though, because Fury's been banned for 2 months or so now. And the last couple times we talked about Modern, I feel like Yawgmoth is still shown on an event basis to have a worse matchup against Rhinos than it did this weekend for some reason. So it could just be variance too. Like, even in 450 matches, there's still a 10% swing or so in the statistical understanding of that. But
also, I mean, bear in mind, there's also more Rhino players than ever before. So I think as you get more newcomers to the deck, there's new challenges.
I'm guessing, like many things, okay? Like if Rhinos is doing really well, then more people are going to be playing Rhinos, including people who don't have a deep stand level knowledge of how to pilot the deck, right? I think that happens a lot less often with Yawgmoth, just because of the way the deck plays, the lack of overlap it has with other kinds of strategies. Not that Rhinos has a boatload, but at least you have all the Cascade stuff and the fetch lands, and you can play Living End if you're so inclined. But yeah, I think Yawgmoth, I think, is more of an enthusiast deck, and I think that you're getting at something there, Stan, right? Which is I'm guessing a lot of the top Yawgmoth players knew what they were doing. They had a really good game plan. They had if you come in with a plan, you're halfway there, or maybe a quarter of the way there.
I will say, I saw Matt Nass had one Tarmogoyf in his sideboard, and I don't know if y'all saw that.
That's the difference maker.
Yeah, that one Tarmogoyf he did say it was for the Rhinos matchup, so who knows?
Yeah, I watched Matt Nass play some games at the top tables while he was doing really well in the tournament. And yeah, it's something else to watch Matt Nass play a deck that requires the gameplay at hand and the thought processes, even as someone who barely really knows what's going on in Yawgmoth. It was impressive to see maneuvering ways to wins.
Should we talk about the top 8 in this tournament?
Oh,
yeah,
please.
I think so. All right, this tournament, the top 8 was 3 Yawgmoth, 2 Rhinos, 1 4-color, and 1 Teamer, 1 Omnath, 1 Living End, 1 Creativity. And the event was won by Teamer Rhinos.
Woo.
Min Nguyen.
Heck yeah.
Teamer Rhinos. Pretty stock list from what I looked at it.
Teamer Rhinos.
Yeah. And every list in this top 8 looked pretty stock when I was reviewing it for what it's worth. But congratulations to people who made the top 8 of this, what might have been one of the largest invite-only Magic tournaments of all time. I believe it was similar to how DreamHack Atlanta was also one of the largest invite-only Magic tournaments of all time. Our Rhinos wins.
Stan, I feel like this is just like a dream list of Teamer Rhinos. I don't know how much longer we'll be playing Teamer Rhinos, but Min's list is exactly how I draw it up, probably. Besides maybe one more land because of the Surveil lands, but Min certainly did just fine with 21 and a Mutavault.
And 4 Lorwyn revealed.
Yes, Stan. It's Lorwyn is the magic land. Lorien is the Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, it's Lorien revealed, not Lorwyn revealed.
Lorwyn sneak peek reveal.
That's what I said. Lorwyn revealed.
Yeah, that's fine. It just slides off the tongue.
We'll go with it.
All right, let's move quickly through a couple of other events in isolation before we move on to this giant matrix that Shane has been looking at. This MTG Dex.net matrix is pretty interesting. But here's what it is. I did pull the top 8 from Ottawa, which I thought was interesting. So Ottawa's metagame of decks that were over 5% was a smaller tournament for sure. It was about 500 people. So it was Teamer Rhinos at 19.45%, Golgari Yawgmoth at 9.83%, Titan at 7.3%, Scam at 5.6%, Murktide at 5.4%, and Living End at 4.6%. Kind of similar. There's less talk in here about the 4-color decks from what I saw online. However, I'm sure that some people managed to pull that deck together in time to play this event. The top 8 for this one, though, was pretty wild to me. And actually, there was a 4-color. I forgot there was one 4-color Rhinos in the top 8 of this particular tournament. But here's what we're talking. 5 Rhinos lists. Teamer Rhinos, Teamer Rhinos, Teamer Rhinos, Teamer Rhinos, and 1 Domain Rhinos.
It's actually Teamer mid-range, Dave.
It's not, though. If you look at the list, they did it to us. They meleeed us, as I like to call it these days. Thanks for calling it mid-range. And then you had 1 Living End pilot and 2 Azorius Prison pilots. And this Azorius Prison list, maybe we'll talk about it later. It was very well performing. It seemed like in multiple different tournaments, it did okay. Or Azorius Control did okay in Denver. It did pretty well in Denver. Top-aided twice in Ottawa. And then this tournament was actually won by Ulysses Genyam Paradis on Living End.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a top 8 of 5 Rhinos decks,
wonder why.
You're the Living End guy. I guess you want to dodge the Azorius decks, but you can hope that the Rhinos decks beats up on Azorius, I guess. Aww.
Yeah. The Azorius list, I think, are worth people taking a look at. I'll just give you the top line of it. It's got, why am I still even forgetting your face? Narset. It's got Narset Days Undoing in it. Yeah, so it's like, wow, where is that coming out, and why is that applicable now, like doing well suddenly, or blue-white control style decks doing well suddenly? Maybe we'll have some words about it a little later on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is main deck Chalice of the Voids and counter spells.
Yes, and to go along with that as well, Yokohama, I couldn't find a top 8 earlier when I was putting these notes together. It's probably out there somewhere now, but Yokohama was also won by Living End.
Whoa.
So we have Teamer Rhinos, Living End, and Living End as the winners of the RCs this weekend.
I have the link right here if you want me to, run it down real quick.
Yeah, you want to do the top 8?
Top 8, we have so we got Rhinos, Living End, Esper Reanimator. That's kind of cool. Goryo's Vengeance. Rhinos, Scam, Rhinos, Living End, Amulet. So that would be 3 Rhinos, Living End, Esper, Scam, 2 Living End, and an Amulet.
Stan, Doom, do you like the world that we're living in here? It's Cascade's world and we're enjoying it? Or are we just afraid of running into Living End now?
I don't know.
Devon, you go first.
I mean, it kind of is what it is. I mean, as a fellow Rhino aficionado, like I'll keep playing the deck as long as they let me keep playing it. I just got to add some more Living End sideboard cards. There is quite a bit more, and I do expect Living End to kind of increase in popularity a bit. One thing that I kind of will say, I really want to try experimenting with the domain lists, just because I haven't tried it too much yet, and I really want to see how kind of Scion and Leyline change that dynamic a little bit. It almost feels like it makes it a little bit more high variance, which is, for a Rhinos mirror that's already has quite a bit of variance involved in it. If one person opens Leyline Scion, it seems pretty hard to beat that. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. But I mean, I don't mind it for the most part.
I mean, you played that this weekend, right, Stanislav? I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, Rainbow Rhinos. It was definitely a good league for me. What's odd is, like, I feel like Rhinos and Cascade decks in general are not that hard to hate out.
That's what it feels like, right? Whenever you're facing something down.
Yeah, there's so many hate cards. Like, how many games have we lost of just like a chalice that we just could not find the piece that answers it? And I don't know. It's odd to me that, like, maybe we're not seeing more of that And I wonder if it's because just a lot of people who would be playing other decks and trying to beat Rhinos are just picking up Rhinos right now. And it's just like, deck is linear. It makes a lot of sense. It's fun to play. Let's just stompy.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about this gigantic win rate matrix, because I think this is pretty revealing about the current state of Modern. And it's when I say current, I mean current. I mean literally this past weekend. But this past weekend from mtgdex.net had 19,442 matches tracked.
That's
So
a lot.
many.
So, I mean, that's like 40 events. They capture stuff from like small events on Magic Online to things like DreamHack Denver, the qualifiers, the U.S. Regional Championship, the Regional Championship at Denver, the Regional Championship face-to-face Ottawa, the Champions Cup Final in Japan at Big Magic. There's the, online challenges and prelims and things like that. So there's a lot of Magic to digest here, 40 random events total, but so much data. And if you look at the performance, I'm going to go popularity down this list. Most played decks this weekend, talk about their win rates, and then I looked at their win rate matrix and kind of tried to give 1 to 2 sentence summaries about what's going on with these decks right now. So Temur Rhinos was 51%. It did pretty well against most popular things this weekend, besides, of course, Living End, but also did pretty poorly against Hammer Time, which kind of always surprises me, but I imagine the people who are playing Hammer Time still now are really good at the deck and probably have good game plans against Rhinos. And, you can't always just get there with 1 or 2 Force of Vigors or something like that. But generally, Rhinos is still a very solid deck across much of what you're going to see. Yawgmoth was 52%. Across all these events. Impressive across the board, honestly. Like, its first truly dire matchup is all the way down at 4-color, like Rainbow Rhinos. And but that deck's only going to get more popular, so that's a little bit sketchy for our Yawgmoth pilots, perhaps. But right now, I think you could do a lot worse than like playing Yawgmoth. I think if you look at the chart, Titan's 49, still not performing particularly well against the very top of the meta, besides against Yawgmoth. Scam at 48%. I'm honestly surprised Scam is still the 4th most played deck across all these events this weekend. Like, it's really only doing pretty well against Titan and then slower decks like Green Tron and then 4-color Creativity, which it has a little bit of time to pick apart. Like, pretty broadly not great against a lot of other stuff.
Remember after Fury got banned and Scam won a big tournament in
Yep.
Europe, and people were like,
Lost
"We
it.
banned the wrong card. It's still overpowered."
That post was still up on Reddit like 3 days ago.
Oh,
the
Reddit.
Thursday before the RC, there was a whole thread on Reddit. Yeah, Reddit is totally true, but like, I thought it was wild. I was looking for any data over the weekend when I was starting to do research, and I was like, wow, people are still talking about Scam, and like the ball is not in that court anymore. Everybody, we are somewhere else right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people maybe chose to play Scam, or maybe the people that chose to play Scam were maybe a little bit scared that there would be too much Cascade hate, and maybe they just wanted like a deck that could give them some free wins, because I mean, you still get the free wins off of Grief plus Not Dead, and that happens sometimes. But yeah, it's definitely the matchups do, like you said, show that without Fury, that a lot of these more creature-based strategies are a lot worse against Scam.
I will say one thing, and that is, if there becomes a lot more Living End, Scam does have a positive matchup against Living End, which might be give it a little bit of space to get a little bit better overall. So
I will also say a bit of a spoiler. We will be talking about a different Rakdos deck that does have Grief in it that did well. So bear with me.
Oh,
okay.
okay.
So Living End was 55% across all of these tournaments. Great weekend for Living End overall. It was at least 49% against the 9 most popular decks until we get to Green Tron, where it was 43%. 65% against Temur Rhinos. That's not where you want to be, for Rhinos at least. So Living End did great, won a couple tournaments. Definitely Living End's time to shine. We'll see how long that can keep up, because, as you did say, Stan, and we've indicated, is like, it does feel like it's easy to hate out the Cascade strategy, but maybe not easy enough.
It was also 57% against the 4-color, the Domain Rhinos as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good against either Rhino
Yeah, if anything, Living End's arguably easier to hate out than it is Rhinos because it doesn't have as good of a backup plan as Rhinos does. So interesting to see how much graveyard hate people are going to start packing in the coming weeks.
And then you have to play the mirror match, which just seems miserable. I know Caleb, who was in for the RC, played Living End, and I came across them playing a mirror match. And after the mirror match, he says to me, "Yeah, we drew." I was like, oh, good Lord. That looks miserable. Okay, Murktide was up next in popularity, 48% overall. So if you want to play Jund and you want, but you also weirdly want to beat Titan, Scam, Burn, and Scales, here you go. Play this deck. Domain Zoo, 53. Another pretty impressive weekend for Domain Zoo. It even had a 47% against Living End. Maybe the power of stubborn denial there.
You mean it beat Living End?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that's impressive for a creature strategy.
Yeah.
To be 47%.
That it's close to 50-50.
I see. Yeah.
It only really looked bad against the 4-color Omnath decks in terms of the top part of the meta, but overall Domain Zoo looking like a solid choice if you're into that strategy, and Lord knows I am.
It's just, it's nice to have like a true blue aggro deck in the format.
I mean, it's multicolor. Stan.
Curving out with cheap creatures that get increasingly stronger.
Are you talking about Merfolk right now?
True blue creature strategy.
It's good to be back. Good to be back, y'all.
For what it's worth, I'm happy that I bought my Scion of Dracos and Territorial Kavu last week before all this happened.
Did you get your Leylines last week? You had to get those too.
Nope. Did not, Devon. I have one.
I definitely was glad my ear was to the ground on Friday because I was just like, okay, let's find a seller with like 50,000 sales on TCG that had 4 because I don't have to deal with them like backing out. They're not going to bother doing it. And so, yeah, I've got 4 on the way. But yeah, I agree, Stan. I'm all about just having turn things sideways, have them be like 5/5s for 2 mana. I'm all for it. Stan, you know what's fun? Tishana's Tidebinder can respond to the attack trigger of Territorial Kavu and turn it into a 0/0.
Good to know.
Yeah, that was sweet.
That it can.
The real problem is I had Grant. They are a judge next to me, and I'm like, Grant, does this do what I want? Yes, it does, but not if they remove it with it because it looks at all the state-based actions at the same time. So they had, of course, Tribal Flames. So Ripperino. But it was cool to think. It was cool to realize I could do it. But keep that in mind, gamers. Hammers was 50%. Still looking pretty rough out there for Hammer time, honestly, especially with the popular decks in the meta. It has some not amazing, there's just like enough not amazing stuff going on for it and some pretty bad ones. Makes it feel pretty dicey to bring Hammer out. But I mean, if you can get to 50%, maybe you're good enough to spike the tournament. 4-color Omnath, 53%. Solid weekend for Sir Omnath. Like, it looks like a pretty solid pick across the metagame. Some really strong matchups against, like, Is It Murktide, Domain Zoo, and Hammer. So, yeah, Omnath. It's never a deck I want to face down. It seems like it's positioned well enough. Like, have you been facing down Stanislav, Doom, Dave? Have you seen 4-color Omnath and hated every second of your life?
I haven't seen it a lot. What's that 8% though? That's like sticking out like a sore thumb. Scroll up a little bit. I gotta see
in
what
13 matches.
Is.
It is Tron.
Oh,
Tron.
That makes sense. Okay, yeah,
yes.
That tracks.
8%. That might be the lowest entry on this entire spread.
No, there's a 7.
There's a 7
There's a
down there.
7.
Oh, there's a 7? Oh, there is. It's blue-white control against creativity. How can blue-white control be 7% against creativity? That doesn't make any sense.
Woof.
No, I haven't been seeing a lot of Omnath, thankfully.
Yeah.
And I haven't been playing a lot of Modern.
It feels like it's lurking.
Unfortunately.
It's lurking beneath the surface or waiting to still be good. Speaking of things that are lurking beneath the surface and aren't good, sad to say Greentron is it's at 44%. It's probably time to put this deck down, y'all. Like, unless your LGS just loves 4-color Omnath decks and Living End, like, you're not going to do super well, I don't think, in any tournament. And then
it's also 48% against Cascade, 47% against Yawgmoth, 20% against Titan, and 30% against Evoke. That is
bad. It's bad news.
That's a lot of decks.
As the kids would say, the best time to put down Tron was 2 months ago. The second best time to put down Tron is now.
Yeah, I mean, I've hung up the Karns, sadly, for probably forever. I mean, there's always something that can come back, but we'll see. We've got burn at 43. Yeah, burn at 43%. 4-color creativity 52. And interesting.
What happened to creativity? It felt like it did really well in Denver, and then you look at this aggregate, and it's 51%, and it's not great against Temur or Yawgmoth or Rakdos. It's just pretty good against Titan. So, like, I don't know what's going on here with creativity.
I think it's like leaning hard on its performances against like overall against like Amulet, Hammer, 4-color Omnath, and Scales. I think that's kind of where it's trying to like bread its butter or whatever. I don't know what butter its bread.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I played against creativity online, and I was like, oh no, this deck is, I mean, it's a continuation from last week and the last couple of large modern tournaments. Creativity has been popping up, but I played against it on Zoo, and I was like, oh, this deck is back, and look, their Archons just kill everything.
Yeah,
it's like the only way to get rid of a Scion.
So the problem with creativity is like it's really, really hard to resolve a 4-mana sorcery in Modern right now. There's Stubborn Denials, Spell Pierces, Falster Storms, Force Negations. There's so many things that are preventing that from happening. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like you said, it's preying on the non-blue decks for sure. It does have a proactive game plan. It's good enough against those decks, but
yeah, interesting.
And then our final sort of popular deck in the meta is Scales. It was 51% across all these tournaments. Strikes and Gutters here as well. It had like, a horde like 15, 16% against Amulet Titan. So not great. It's strong against some things, weaker against others. That's not the kind of deck that I love bringing to tournaments personally. One, because it's hard in Scales, it's hard to play. But two, it's because, you don't want to have to dodge that many matchups. You know what I mean? And so those are the win rates from decks like we know and maybe kind of love, and a pretty decent sample size to work from for a lot of these. And it's all very contemporary. Like I know it to be like, okay, this could have been from 3 months ago because this is just from this weekend. But then after that, there are some really interesting up-and-comers that I'm sure you all have noticed. First off is Azorius Control, like 56% across 361 matches. It did really well against the top decks besides Hammer, where it was like 30%, but only across 10 matches. So the data we have here indicates that it was doing really well against the expected meta, but then falls off against the deeper field, which is honestly, you're probably fine being there, right? Like it was like 73% against Temur Rhinos. It was 72% against Living End. That's the glory of being able to run main deck hate like Teferi 3, like potentially Chalice of the Void. You can sideboard really strongly against them as well. Yeah, it's kind of miserable. Like I saw LSV play against Azorius Control in round 7 of the main event. The matchup just looked miserable, as you would expect.
Yeah, for what it's worth.
What was Luis playing? Was Luis on?
Oh, he was on
he was on Rainbow
Domain
Rhinos.
Yeah. So we're looking at Gabriel Maxon's list from DreamHack Denver, which is
10K,
not
the 10K.
Oh, it's just the 10K?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was Sunday's event.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, he went 6-0-2, top 16, and it doesn't have the Narset lock that we were talking about. It's more just a one-ring control list with 2 Chalice of the Void main. It's got Supreme Verdict. It's got Teferi 3, like we said. It's playing Leyline Binding, of course, and Prismatic Ending. And so it's just kind of like counter spells and removal deck. But anything that can run Chalice of the Void and be able to exploit it main is probably in a pretty decent spot at the moment, and Blue-White Control can certainly fit that bill.
Yeah, Blue-White is such a weird one to me. Like you said, you're at 74, 75 against the Cascade decks, then you're about a coin flip or less against Yawgmoth, Rakdos, and Titan. But then past that, I mean, yeah, you have, the 80%, the 64% against Murktide and Domain. But then if you look past that, it's like, what else do we have? We have 38%,
a lot
46%.
Of red.
Yeah, a lot of red after that. So, I mean, it seems like one of those decks where if you don't get those Cascade matchups, it can be pretty difficult. But I think I want to say I remember I think it was Patrick Wu who posted his matchup thread, and I think he played against Rhinos 7 times in the event. And sure, yeah, if you play with Blue-White Control, if you play against Rhinos 7 times, yeah, you're probably going to top 8.
Yeah.
Why can't more decks play at least one Chalice main right now? What's stopping Murktide from doing that?
There's a lot of 1-mana spells.
Well,
they just do it for
0
zero.
though.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
There's that thing. Yeah.
I don't know.
Too much air? I mean,
they have Bauble, I guess. I don't know if that matters.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's definitely a sideboard card, right? And that's the main thing, I think, is that like sideboard, a lot of people have some Chalices. They have some EEs. They play them on 0. This deck just has the game one chance, where it's like, okay, I drew one of my 2 chalices, and I have a lot of ways to prevent you from killing me while I draw to them and get my pieces of fate. Like, this deck has Teferi 3, it has Supreme Verdict, it has Chalice of the Void, and those are all tools that I don't really want to be facing down very much. Counter spells, things like that, Force of Negation.
I will say this deck too, if you look at it, I think one thing, Stan, that might help with Chalice specifically is this deck also has no 1-drops, right? So the only 1-drop that it has is in its sideboard, it's Stern Scolding. And so yes, we're talking about playing it mostly as anti-cascade tech at 0, but having access main deck to a card that you can also play against 1-drops. Like, for example, you can play it on 1 against Murktide if you are game 1 against Murktide and then side it out. So it's not as much of a liability in this deck to have it, because you can have it be effective against maybe 1 tick higher than maybe other decks are able to.
Speaking of Chalice of the Void, I found this tweet from, I believe it was Jeff. I don't remember the exact name, but it was at Rhythmic on Twitter, and they posted the most played cards from the event. And even as a sideboard card, well, I guess in Blue White Control's case, the main deck card, but Chalice of the Void was the 11th most played card in the entire event. So,
oh wow, yeah, that was the list where like Violent Outburst is like the 5th most played card or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
Outburst is
like
in the top 10. Outburst and Shardless were 8 and 9, so it's like,
yeah. Surprise.
I just think back to the days of Faithless Looting as at Phoenix, where we started seeing a lot of decks playing a main deck, Surgical, and Phoenix decks were doing it because it was a free spell that was good against the mirror, but it was just popping up everywhere. And if we're looking at Chalice or Engineered Explosives for that matter as these like free hate cards that can have some utility elsewhere, I just don't think we should wave off that as a possible way to experiment in this metagame. And maybe the reason we're not seeing more of that experimentation is because there isn't that much modern play actually happening this season. And we had the timing of this tournament was at a period where just, unless you're practicing for something like this, you don't have as much incentive to play modern as other times of the year.
Because it's not the RCQ format, you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, could be.
And it's not on Arena.
Yeah. All right, what else do we have here?
What else is on the up-and-comers list? Well, we talked about 4-color Rhinos, right? And I think, what did we say, like a 57% win rate in Denver? Well, get this, y'all. Across the whole weekend, it's at like 62% across 320-ish tracked matches. And the error bars are still pretty impressive. Like, you'd say, okay, well, could it be a 45% deck? But the error bars are between 55 and 66, meaning the lowest number the data indicates that this deck sort of performed this weekend would still be a top tier modern deck.
It would still be the top of this list, almost still
it's
at 56%.
Insane.
So it's like not the deepest of data, right? But it did pretty dang well against the top 11 decks of the format. It even wasn't that much of a dog to living end at like 43%. So some particularly eye-opening, eye-popping numbers are things like 74% against Teamer Rhinos, 62% against Yogg, 65 against Amulet, 73 against Rakdos Scam. So like, I don't know, the early data from this at least is indicating that if you aren't playing specific tech cards main and maybe not enough against like in the sideboard, like only things like 4-color Creativity, Scales, Azorius Control were doing noticeably well against it. Like I talked to LSV a little bit.
Excuse me?
Between rounds.
You
just
talked to
casually dropped
LSV?
that one.
Yeah, I was just like, so yeah, what's up?
You
LSV?
saved that for minute 68 of this podcast.
Well,
You talked to LSV.
I knew that he was on the deck.
What does he smell like?
I knew he was on the deck. He smelled like Denver. He smelled like a Denver local.
He smells
Tell
like
us about
patchouli.
Smell SV.
Got it.
Smell SV.
He's a lovely man. And so we chit-chatted a little bit about the deck, and the thing that he mentioned that he liked about it, much like I think 4-color Rhino sort of has in general, is the backup plan of Scion dodges a lot of the hate. Right. So it's like, okay, I don't have to just rely on my Cascade. I can cast a turn 2 Scion, and especially with Leyline, it's really hard to get off the board.
It's unkillable. You can't kill it.
Yeah.
You can abrade it.
No, that's hexproof.
It has Hexproof, my friend.
Cannot abrade it. You can pick your poison it.
Yeah, you have
That's
to make
which
them
I
second.
think many people will be doing. Yeah.
I didn't even realize one of the extra keywords was Hexproof.
Yes.
God.
Hexproof,
Yeah,
Trample,
it is
Gain
sort of
Strike, Vigilance. Yeah.
Lifelink.
Inexplicably, it's not flying. Like it has
does
flying,
fly.
which is actually easy to forget. I had people attack into me when I was playing Domain. They would be like, "I'm going to do something tricky, and I'm going to attack with 2 guys, and you're not going to be able to block with your Scion." And I was like, "Block," and they're like,
Block.
"Yeah,
Block.
It's got flying. It's got flying."
Love it. Secret flying. Things that we were just talking about that card that looks like it should fly, but it doesn't in that red deck and standard. And then there's this that maybe it just looks like it doesn't fly, but it does. Yeah, I think like this bodes well for this deck, but I think people are gonna have to try to start fighting this deck. And we'll see what happens.
They're going to be picking their poison.
I think, yeah, that's kind of exactly what Dave is saying. I think a lot of reason this deck did so well is because people weren't necessarily like sure if it was actually going to be that good, and maybe they were like, yeah, what's a sign or two, and then once people started playing against it, it's like, oh crap, we need very specific sideboard cards for this, and it's like if you play a Rhinos matchup and your opponent has Leyline Scion and you just like play a Rhinos on turn 3, that Scion gets to hold back the entire Rhino squadron while still attacking, and you can't answer it. It's like it holds off an entire turn 3 Cascade spell by itself. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense.
Love it. And I know, Stan, you'll be talking a little about your experiences later, so let's keep moving on. And here's the secret Rakdos deck I was talking about. Okay,
I love a secret Rakdos deck.
This is the one that LSV told them about.
It's the one that we talked about last week. This is like the Rakdos Shadow list. And it was at 54%, only about 154 matches or so. But the early data here shows it's strong against the very top of the meta, but then dicey after that. But that's an okay place to be, potentially. Like the lists I found from the weekend appear to be really similar to Harlan Feuerer's deck that we talked about last week. And Harlan
played it twice at a 5K and in the RC.
Yeah, he played.
Well, if he's playing in a 5K, then he probably didn't do so well in the RC, right?
I can confirm did not do well in the RC with this deck or in the 5K for what it's worth. But this other pilot named Clayton Strickland did well. Went 6-0-1 in a 8-seat RCQ 5K on Sunday at DreamHack.
Nice. So yeah, this is the deck that somehow gets by with running Stalactite Stalker. I talked to Dave Shields from Jerry's podcast. I can't call it Jerry's podcast. I told Dave, I was like, Dave, it's the Jerry and Dave podcast. You're on it. I appreciate your efforts. And he said
wait. It's pronounced Jerry, but it's spelled with a G.
Jerry. So the
Gary?
Guy Gieri.
Yeah. So yeah, this is like we talked about. It's got, red and black cards. It's a little bit lower to the ground. It has 4 grief and 4 not dead after all, and that's it in terms of that package. But it has, removal. It has Thoughtseize, it has 1-drops, it has 2-drops, it has Inti, it has Dothy. It's a little bit more aggressive compared to maybe the slower scam decks that are still playing stuff like Shieldred as a top end. So this is just trying to get in there, and apparently Stalactite's testing well enough that they aren't cutting it. So it's getting there, I guess. If you want a weird wild Nicottle, there you go. But yeah.
And I do, for the record. I'm definitely looking at this deck pretty hard because I also bought 4 of these last week.
Is that Inti?
Inti.
Oh, the showcase one.
Yeah,
that's hot.
I want that card.
What is the interaction between Stalker and Dothy Voidwalker?
How so?
So does Descend, is it a one-sided mechanic?
Yeah, it's only your stuff.
Yeah, I see. And Dothy only exiles opponent stuff?
Yeah.
Yep.
So if opponent descends, Stalactite gets nothing.
I mean, it's still not ideal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a non-bow.
It's a bit of a non-bow.
They managed to avoid each other, fortunately.
New card. I gotta ask. Someone's gotta
absolutely.
ask.
I just checked. You saw me flipping between the 2 cards on screen here.
So that's about it. Those are the cool decks. I think that Azorius Control pilots are going to start coming out a little bit more strongly. The people who really want to play Control are going to do so. I think 4-color Rhinos is going to pop off. I think it was all over the leagues as far as I could tell. And Rakdos Shadow might be a future enthusiast deck, so we'll see. But in terms of the new decks, the new builds of some old decks, Dave, I know that you played with the new domain Leyline Zoo?
It's tough because I actually don't have a ton to say about this. I played it for a league, and I think that Stan summed it up. I think that we should kind of like maybe go back and forth a little bit here, because we have to talk about like the cards that are shared between this deck and the 4-color Rhino deck, because it is a new like powerful core in a sense. Like Scion of Draco is already a card that people like to play in certain decks occasionally. It's seen play occasionally, and like it was already in Zoo. It's just Leyline made it better. It was being played in decks like Calibrated Blast and stuff like that. I think that people even tried it in Rhinos previously without Leyline at different points in time, right?
Well, without Leyline of the Guild Pact,
right? Without Leyline of the Guild Pact, yes.
When Leyline's Binding was printed, then there were 4-color decks for Draco and Binding. Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second, because we've hinted about it a couple of times. The Leyline plus Scion core for a deck in general, or like game plan package, I guess we should say, that is super legit, I think, right? Like we don't have any debate with those 12 cards going into decks and doing incredible things, right?
Yeah. I mean, the turn 0 Leyline and the turn 2 Draco is a lot.
Yeah.
The first time you do it, it's
Hexproof.
like, it's like what?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a Sarah Angel with lifelink that you can't kill for 2 mana, and Hexproof is something that maybe people forgot about. Even Stan was saying, well, yeah, you can't kill it, right? And it has Vigilance, so it holds down opposing forces, and it has lifelink, so it puts you back into a game if you're playing against an aggressive deck. So there's lots of like that is a true thing. I think that beyond that, like Zoo is a super interesting deck because it gets to play cheap counter magic, but I don't think it's a very different deck other than just like turn creatures sideways and attack, be kind of tempo-ish, have a couple, like make sure you're playing your spots. I mean, it's essentially a burn deck. Like the matches that I won, I killed people with, I closed games out with Tribal Flame. It was like Draco and Tribal Flame to go fast. And then matches that I lost was like they killed my creatures. And I couldn't get out of it. Or I had a draw that was really heavy on Wild Nacatl, which like, I don't care. Wild Nacatl sucks. It's a terrible card.
Don't say that. What's really funny about this deck, because I didn't even write this down, but I did play a little bit with the Domain Zoo deck, not the Rhinos deck. But one thing that I noticed about Leyline, and maybe you guys can attest to this, it is kind of like night and day when you just never have to fetch. Right. And a lot of times with the Zoo deck, because you have to fetch shock for a 1-drop, fetch shock for the Kavu on 2, you're typically starting games at, somewhere between 16 and 14 life. And that like 6 life buffer is massive in so many different matchups.
Yeah, and it's actually super scripted in the build that I was playing, because there's only one Triome in that deck. So you're going turn 1 Savai Triome, whatever the Mardu Triome, and then Breeding Pool is what you're doing like almost every game, which is kind of awkward because you can't turn 1 Nacatl then, because you're often getting a tapped Triome so that you can go turn 2 Kavu. And Kavu, I will say playing this league did sort of renew my love for Territorial Kavu. Like that is just a solid card, 5 mana 2/2 or 2 mana 5/5 is like amazing. The fact that it does the little things that it does and lets you kind of loot or rummage or whatever it is kind of a nice thing. But you do sort of tweak the early play pattern so that you can play that card, and you have awkward moments quite frequently where like, well, I have Ragavan and Territorial Kavu. Am I just going to play a 4/4 on turn 2, or like what am I going to do in this particular situation? So there is some awkward sequencing stuff that happens depending on how aggressive you want to be.
You can turn 2 Kavu with Xander's Lounge and Temple Garden while also being open for a turn 1 Wild Nacatl. Is there another reason you're not playing those 2 cards instead of Savai Triumph?
Well, you could just go turn 1 Breeding Pool Nacatl, right? And then get the Triumph on turn 2 with Savai. You could do it either way.
You can, but then you can't play a Kavu on turn 2.
Right.
If you do that.
Yeah.
But you just pick the sequence based on what your opening hand looks like.
Right. Yes. I'm just saying there is enough backup option like what you're talking about, Stan, in the deck. There's 1 Triome in the builds that I saw, and it doesn't have a backup plan. It's like either you're doing it or you're not going to have Domain on turn 2.
This is why you just need Leyline in every opening hand.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Now, I did have sort of the normal stuff here. First off, I think I had bad matchups for this deck. I played against Adnaz and Dredge, which were two of my losses, which is like, I don't even know what's going on with these. And then I believe I beat Burn and Spike Blade, and I lost to Yawgmoth as well. And Yawgmoth just destroyed me with creature removal, essentially. And then they were able to fetch up answers to Leyline, essentially, so then they could kill Scion. And so I beat, the Spike Blade deck, by the way, I thought was pretty fun. The Cryptic Coat kind of whole thing, that was pretty cool to play against, but I did end up winning that one. I think that it's interesting also that it gets rid of some of the cards that I would feel like are sort of like the less good cards in the deck, like bringing in the Leyline package, because that's all you have to do is bring in 4 Leylines, Leyline of the Guild Pact. You lose Reprieve, you lose Dramoka's Command, you lose some like of these kind of like utility cards that the deck was playing anyway, which I don't think you're so much worse for the wear for getting rid of those cards. I believe that the list that I was playing was like basically down 2 Reprieve at Dramoka's Command. It was playing 3 Lightning Bolts instead of 4 Lightning Bolts, and that's how we're playing Leyline of the Guild Pact in this, which makes sense. But I can tell you, in this deck, I truly hated drawing Leyline off the top. Is the worst feeling in this deck because you cannot do anything else with it. You can't. There's nothing else you can do with it other than rummage it to a Kavu. And so you really, like, I had a game, the first game I played with this, I went turn 1 Leyline into Scion, and I was like, wow, this is great. And then I think that my turn 3 draw and turn 4 draw were both additional Leylines. Ooh. So I was just like, okay, cool. So I've got 3 Leylines sitting here, nothing to do with any of them, and it just is what it is. But, I'm open to playing more with this deck just because I do like Ragavan decks, but it didn't feel to me on this particular playthrough like this is something I'm super gravitating towards. And it kind of made sense why Leyline ended up in a couple of decks that had other things to do with the card, even if those things are as meager as being toss fodder for pitch elementals and force negation, essentially. So that's like my small capsule review of Domain Zoo.
Mm-hmm. I guess I felt the same way with Rainbow Rhinos. Like, the package is good. Leyline Binding, probably still the best removal spell in Modern, especially because of how easy it is to get it online with or without the Leyline of the Guild Pact.
Mm-hmm.
Having Draco on turn 2, it was nice before, but the fact that now it's actually just also has all the keywords and is apparently indestructible, something that I didn't notice and never came
back. Not indestructible.
Whatever. Just was never relevant in my league. I guess that.
Are you sure that was never relevant in your league? Or did you just not realize it was relevant in your league? Yeah, you're like sitting there killing people, and you're like, "Why aren't they killing me? Why aren't they killing this?"
They just have a Terminate?
Just shatter it.
Cast your Terminate. What's going on here?
So, I should mention, I almost had a flawless league. I almost went 5-0, 10-0. 2 reasons why I didn't get the 10-0 was because one of my opponents rage quit after game 1, and I also lost a match to Amulet Titan that was just like teched out against me like crazy. They were playing Storm's Wraths to like wipe the board. But regardless, I was playing a weird version, I guess. Like, I did not have Lorien revealed, and I didn't pick the deck totally arbitrarily. I found one that did well in, I think, one of the challenges. So maybe it was just a pilot was experimenting and did well, and maybe that sort of speaks to the power of the new package, because I actually did feel like I missed Lorien revealed, and it made it a lot harder for me to get to 3 and 4 mana, especially. Granted, having Leyline plus Scion, you don't need to get to 4 mana.
Right.
Because those 2 cards are very good. But I had one match, probably against the Titan match, where they removed the Leyline, and that did feel like a little bit of a setback. And of course, as you pointed out, Dave, with Zoo, like, drawing the Leyline and not having a way to cast it, like, is super annoying. And yes, Rhinos has the backup of pitching it to force negation or subtlety, but that doesn't always come up.
No.
The life gain was awesome. Like, the lifelink of Scion, of course, but the fact that just having the turn 1 Leyline and not having to crack fetches was really important, because you can hold back your fetches if you kept a 2-lander. And to what Devon pointed out earlier, like, maybe you fetch 1 card to just surveil away a non-land if you need to get to 3 mana. Like, that felt really cool. playing 4-color also opens up your sideboard. I think that's noteworthy as well. Like, I love having access to Teferi against the Temur mirrors. I love having access to Teferi against Living End, and theoretically, it's good against Azori's control if you're paired against them.
The list that you copied, Stan, did it happen to have any copies of Draenith Magistrate on the sideboard? Because I have seen people do that before as the Cascade. Like, you just cut your Rhinos and Cascade into Draenith against Living End.
It did not.
It's another option that you could explore with 4-color, too.
Yeah.
My Zoo list had it in the sideboard. For what it was worth, it was interesting.
The other thing that I wanted to mention too about the 4-color Rhinos deck is the list that won. There was a 10K at the DreamHack on, I think it was Sunday or something, and the list that won that was Rainbow Rhinos, but they had 4 Territorial Kavu in the sideboard. So if everybody is loading up on Chalices, you just swap the Footfalls for Kavus, and you say, "Nice Chalice, here's a 5/5."
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we have seen those Cascade Zoo lists before. Remember, where it was just like, oh, we're gonna Shardless Agent into Territorial Kavu or Ragavan.
Yep.
You know, that's
I think
cool.
I mean, I think if I'm being honest with myself, like I did really well in this league, oddly effortlessly, and I don't think I gave the deck enough credit in that outcome, because I was just like, what is this Leyline really doing for me here? As I was just like 2-0ing opponents left and right.
Yeah.
And there's
another turn 2 Draco. That doesn't seem that good. Seems fine. It does it a lot.
There must be a little correlation.
Why don't they just kill my Scion?
Behind the...
Yeah.
Well, it's got first strike. Like, it just always wins combat. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, like, the package is really strong. I think it's going to be a really important package to look out for in Modern, and like Pick Your Poison or other cards are going to have to find a way to like either interact or get around it. And maybe it's because the specific version I was playing was missing Lorien Revealed that this feeling I'm going to refer to felt extra heightened, but it still just felt like the deck was untuned. It felt like the one I was playing somehow just like found this really powerful package of 12 rainbow cards, plus your powerful package of 10 Cascade cards, because you also had 2 Ardent Plea. And then everything around that didn't make perfect, elegant sense. Like, you still had some Force Negations, but you didn't have any Tidebinders, you didn't have any Dead Gone, you didn't have any Murktide or other cards that I was just so used to playing that if this deck lives on, I don't think the version that we saw this weekend is necessarily going to be the final version. And that's probably going to be even scarier if we're also being honest. Like, just because if Leyline plus Scion is Splinter Twin and we find a way to make it even like sharper and more efficient, you know, maybe Leyline is the real problem.
Honestly, now that we're having this conversation, I kind of want to try Leyline plus Scion in Living End, right? Where they load up on a bunch of graveyard heat, you just have a turn 2 unkillable 4/4. Like, seems pretty good.
The juke.
Surprise.
Yeah. Do it, Devon. I dare you.
My Spired Riverwinders have hexproof now, or whatever that card is. Striped Riverwinders. Yeah.
So there is a weird interaction between Leyline and Blood Moon.
Yeah, timestamps, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
whichever comes down
Well, except for
last
basics,
is the
right?
the one that supersedes, except for basics. I did get into this like kind of awkward situation though, where I'm against Amulet, I have Magus of the Moon in hand, I'm fetching basics. I did have the turn 0 Leyline, and maybe I'm just siding incorrectly. Like, maybe you're not supposed to keep Leylines and Dracos and Blood Moons. It felt weird taking them out because like having either angle seems pretty important, but I think that's just something to keep in mind. Like, if you're fetching basics and then you draw a late Leyline, it's just pitch fodder if you can find something to pitch with.
Yeah, which especially post-board, you have a lot more of the pitch cards because you want to bring in Force of Vigor, you have the subtleties, so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I don't know. Deck was good. I feel bad. I sold my Scions last year to someone who was building Zoo, and
Same.
even
Oh,
though
no.
I got him cheap, and I sold them in the black. Not as much dollary dues as I could have made if I held on to them. But who's playing Modern these days in this economy?
True.
Outside of
That's a good
Denver
question.
and Ottawa and in one
Yokohama.
part of Japan.
Outside
yeah.
of the past hour and a half that we spent talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. Outside of the 19,000 matches that occurred in Modern this weekend.
It's not that
Yeah,
much.
just one weekend though. What's a weekend between friends?
Devon, I don't think we should take a break or anything. So you have a Modern deck here on your list
I do.
that you were interested in. I think after that, maybe we could talk a little bit about both the decks that you have there, and then maybe we could talk about where we want to go next. But
We could even skip standard at this point, but I do really want to just touch on this modern deck. So, I posted a whole bunch of deck lists with various formats with MKM cards, and this was kind of one that sort of stuck out to me. It's an updated take on the Goryo's Vengeance Asmo deck list. So the goal here is you have the Asmo package with, your Underworld cookbooks, Urza Sagas to help find those cookbooks. And then you have, the Oval Chase Daredevils to help fuel the Asmos. So that's kind of like step one. And then step two is you parlay that into Goryo's Vengeance with a bunch of large creatures. So these decks in the past have played Gristlebrand. I chose to play Atraxa. I think most people who play Gristlebrand in the past have been on the Agatha Soul Cauldron, because that's like a thing you can do with Gristlebrand. But that's absent from here, so we're just playing, I know, right? Atraxa plus Emrakul.
That's so funny. Yeah.
Everything is good with Cauldron.
Yeah. Everything. Pay 7 life from any of your creatures to draw 7 cards.
But yeah, so the Atraxa Emrakul is our creatures of choice. And then the new card here that kind of sort of ties the room all together is Reenact the Crime. Now, this is a powerful card that a lot of people were talking about during spoiler season. I've heard various things on Twitter. And the card reads, for those of you who don't know, it's 3 blue and a colorless. It's an instant. And you can exile a non-land card in a graveyard that was put there from anywhere this turn, copy it, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So works particularly well with free discard outlets, hence Underworld cookbooks. So, for example, if you can go cookbook, discard, say, an Emrakul to Eon's Torn, that creates the shuffle trigger. Similar to Goryo's, you can respond to the shuffle trigger, reenact the crime, cast the Emrakul for free. So it basically, you now effectively have 8 copies of Goryo's Vengeance to go along with your 8 discard outlets and 8 fatties. So it just gives you a ton of redundancy on doing the thing, right? And then you have preordained Thoughtseize to kind of fill out the draws and make sure the coast is clear and all that stuff. And I did end up picking a trophy with this deck. It did feel pretty good when I played it. Now, granted, I will say that, on average, I think in the 10 games that I won, I think I had my opening hand was Goryo's Vengeance, Emrakul, Cookbook, 2 lands, probably at least like 6 times. No, so you
Nice.
can imagine that's going to increase the win rate a little bit. And unfortunately, I didn't cast a ton of Reenact the Crimes. But one thing that's really cool to point out about Reenact the Crime, it can target their graveyard too. And this happened a couple of times where my opponent would I'm trying to think of the exact situation where I think they somehow discarded something. Maybe it was like a Fable the Mirror Breaker. I was playing against Rakdos or something, and they discarded a Fable the Mirror Breaker, and I had to reenact the crime with not a lot going on. And I was just like, end of turn, I'll reenact your Fable. Go to my turn, chapter 2, discard, and then kind of go from there. So it's really, really versatile in what it can do. Now, granted, it is 4 mana. That's a lot. But yeah, I was relatively impressed with how flexible the card was. You have to pay a lot for it. It does cost 4 mana, so that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah, it's 4 mana with 3 blue pips in a deck with 4 Urza Saga.
Yes, I know. It's not ideal. It's not ideal. So it's actually funny because after this list, because that came up a couple of times, so what I ended up doing to kind of to update the version a little bit is I added 1 chromatic sphere, which sounds kind of weird, but the cool thing about sphere is if you have Saga on chapter 3, you can use the Saga to make colorless mana, use the Saga to go get a sphere, and then use the colorless you floated to turn that into blue to cast Reenact the Crime. So that's something I did with my recent list. There's
you got a Mox Amber in here. Is that also helping a little bit with the blue, or is that just helping with speed?
It's a little bit of both. Like if you have a Rona, so the legends in this deck are 4 Rona and 4 Asmo. So if you have a Rona, you can do that. What's cool about the Amber too is if you're going for Atraxa specifically, you can if you're planning on going for Atraxa, you can go Saga chapter 3, float, go get Amber, discard Atraxa, put Atraxa into play, and the Atraxa gives you the extra mana because the Atraxa is a legend too. So if you're going for an Atraxa turn, you get the Mox Amber mana from there. But yeah, I don't know. This deck felt very powerful when it opened Goryo's. Like I said, I didn't have a ton of reenacts come up, but it came up a couple of times. It was decent. I don't know if I'd play the full 4 copies. I've seen some people experimenting with this list. They've been playing the tutors. So I saw one list that had both Grim Tutor and Profane Tutor, which I thought was kind of strange. I was never a huge fan of Profane Tutor just because it's slow, not great against Teferi, stuff like that. But it does give you some added consistency. And
works in Adnaz, I'll tell you.
As someone who played against Adnaz recently can attest
Recently, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the last, thing to note about this is the saga plan is very good. Like if people who are overloading on Graveyard Hate, I had people who just, would bring in like turn 1 Soul Guide Lantern, turn 3 Endurance. And I was like, all right, I'll make some saga tokens. That's still just good enough against a lot of people. So that's all I got for this deck, really. Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out, Defense Grid. One thing I found out, that card is insane against Rhinos. It's so good because a lot of their defense is like endurance you, force of negation you, whatever, all these free spells, and it makes it so they can't go for the Rhinos plus protection play. They just have to hold up their pitch and the 3 mana to do it, which buys you a ton of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if they're cutting like Brazen Borrowers.
Yeah, no, that card was nice. That's all I really got for this deck, though.
Although that makes the end step Petty Theft harder because that makes Petty Theft cost 5.
Yeah, they have to do it on the odds.
Exactly.
It was cast against me, and it was a huge problem.
Defense Grid
is that's hot.
It's good.
It's always sneaking around the sideboard outskirts, I feel like.
Okay, before we wrap, can I ask you guys one quick question about a different format?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Strictly for timeliness reasons. This weekend, 2 days after this episode comes out, is the first NRG Open of the year here in Chicago.
Ooh, I'll be commentating
already.
Ooh,
oh, yeah. Nice, Devon commentating.
Devon on the 1s and 2s.
Be nice to Stan if he's on camera, okay?
Oh,
well, I don't know if Devon, you've commentated me. You were very nice. We didn't even know each other then, but you felt that connection.
Now that I know you.
Now that you know what my full art shocklands are. So the Saturday 10K is Pioneer. The Sunday 5K is Standard. I've gotten approval from Mission Control to play on Saturday, and I've been a little out of touch with constructed formats over the last month or so. What do you guys think is the play in Pioneer right now?
You're not gonna
Phoenix?
You're not gonna like the answer because I feel like
I don't know. Blue-white control, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm gonna say blue-white control. Look, coming from me, you have to know it's the best deck because I would never tell anybody in their right mind to play blue-white control. But if it's coming from this individual right here, you have to know it's the best deck.
Oh boy, is it because No More Lies was printed?
Yes, Mana Leak is a good card.
Has that changed the Phoenix matchup?
I mean, the Phoenix matchup was always kind of close. Depends on how many rest in pieces you have, but. Yeah, the exiling specifically against Phoenix doesn't come up a ton, but just you can tool your sideboard to be good against Phoenix. I think.
What about in Soul? What about McNamara's in Soul deck?
It's pretty funny you mentioned that. We didn't. This is totally off the cuff. We didn't write any of this down, but I played in Soul on stream today, and I picked up a 4/1. The list felt pretty good. That new card, the Gleaming Gear Drake, that card is sick.
Yeah,
that card's nice.
Is it? It's what's up.
Yeah. So I mean, you could play in Soul. I don't hate the deck. The list that I played was pretty nice.
Okay. Dave, you feel like going to, I think it's at Elmhurst.
I feel like maybe swinging by to say, hey.
Yeah.
If you're going to be there.
Yeah.
Elmhurst is pretty close to me, so.
I don't know if I'll play the Saturday Open, to be honest, but there is a Saturday, they call them RCQs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Reese's?
Yeah. Are they?
It's just the second RCQs? Chance ones. Yeah.
But there's a Pioneer RCQ on Saturday.
Yeah, those are the single elim ones, I think, where it's like 5 rounds, single elim. The person who's left over gets an RC invite.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's $20 to play, and that's the one that kind of piqued my interest versus the full day commitment for $70.
Yeah. Yeah, well, let me know if you do. I could probably stop by on Saturday at some point. Say, g'day.
Blue-white control. That's the deck to beat in Pioneer. What a time to be alive.
I need some stalactite stalkers.
Oh, you gotta pick those up
because that's what I'm getting ready. that's where my mind's at for whatever we'll be doing in Chicago. All right, wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
I've really loved hearing you guys wrap the episodes. I prefer that you do it today instead of me.
Okay. Well, that wraps up this week's show. If you have not yet, Stanislav, it's good to have you back, by the way.
Oh, it's good to be back. I missed you all.
If you have not subscribed to the podcast, feel free to do so. You get those latest episodes as soon as they come out. If you want to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, we appreciate that. Feel free to engage on Spotify. You want to submit a question to us or reach out to us, tweet us at The Dive Down or email thedivedown@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, feel free to join the Patreon at patreon.com/thedivedown. Check out the store at thedivedown.com/store. If you're going to be in Chicago, you want to hang out with us, go to thedivedown.com/Chicago?
thedivedown.com/Chicago
All right.
to RSVP. We got 2 RSVPs already because I posted it in Discord during the show.
You go. You can also head on over to heavyplay.com. Get those deck, dice boxes, playmats, purple now with the Equipmag system. Use code TheDiveDown2024 for 10% off your first order. Shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring the Dive Down. You can get 10% off of your first 2 months with the code in the show notes. It's also the DiveDown_3YO. Save money on paper cards at Nerd Rage. We're going to have Stan at the Nerds Rage event. Use code DIVE8, 8% off your order. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and turn 0 Leyline.